If you have PCOS, you felt this. You do everything right, you eat better, you train harder, you stay disciplined, and your body still doesn't respond the way you expect. Your cycle is off, your weight sticks. Cravings feel stronger than they should. And the explanations you get, hormones, insulin, inflammation, they don't explain why all of this shows up together, because it doesn't feel random. It feels connected. So let's start higher up. What if PCOS isn't your body malfunctioning? What if it's your body deciding it's not a safe time to reproduce? Because if that's true, then everything you're experiencing starts to make sense. So let's map it. Start with this. A bear doesn't reproduce when winter is coming. A bear doesn't reproduce just because it can. It reproduces when conditions are right, when food is stable, when energy is abundant, when survival isn't in question. When winter approaches, everything shifts. Reproduction pauses, not because something is broken, but because it would be risky. Pregnancy requires energy, stability, and safety. And if those aren't guaranteed, then the body waits. The same logic exists in you. Your body is constantly asking a quiet question in the background. Is it a safe time to reproduce? And it answers that question through a small but powerful set of neurons in the brain called Kisspeptin neurons. You don't need to remember the name. Just think of them as the green light for reproduction. When they fire clearly, everything moves in sync. The brain signals, the ovaries respond, ovulation completes, cycles become predictable. It's a coordinated system. But that only works when the signal is clear. So what happens if that signal isn't clear anymore? Not completely off, just unstable. Because if you think about the lived experience of PCOS, that's exactly what it feels like. Cycles don't line up. Ovulation starts, but doesn't finish. Ultrasounds show cysts that don't quite make sense. Weight doesn't respond normally. Cravings feel stronger than they should. Energy comes in waves. It feels like a collection of different problems. But what if it's not? What if it's just one system hesitating? Go back to the bear. When the environment is uncertain, the body doesn't flip a clean switch. It doesn't just turn reproduction off. It slows down. It hesitates. It tests the conditions. It avoids fully committing. What if that's what your body's doing? Because those Kisspeptin neurons don't operate in isolation. They're constantly listening to the state of the body. They respond to insulin, to leptin, to inflammation, to stress. But most importantly, they respond to cellular energy. Not calories on a label, not food in your stomach, but actual usable energy inside your cells. And this is where things start to shift. You can have plenty of food, even excess food, and still send a signal that looks like energy is unreliable. That sounds backwards, but there's a pathway to explain it. Fructose metabolism. Not just from sugar, but also triggered internally through stress, high glucose states, dehydration, alcohol. It's part of a built-in survival system, and it does something very specific. It lowers cellular energy, even if only temporarily. Think of it like dimming the lights in a room. The energy's still there, but the signal says, conserve. In nature, that's useful. It's how animals prepare for scarcity. It's how fat is stored efficiently. It's how survival is prioritized when the future is a little uncertain. But a system like that is never meant to stay on. If the signal keeps firing, the body begins to behave as if energy might not be stable, even when you're eating regularly. Insulin rises, trying to force energy into cells. Fat storage increases. Energy becomes inconsistent. Cravings intensify as the brain tries to correct what it thinks is a shortage. And the signal doesn't stay in metabolism. It reaches the reproductive system. Now imagine those Kisspeptin neurons receiving that message. Energy might not be reliable. Not enough to shut everything down, but enough to hesitate. Here's where something interesting happens. Some systems in the brain are more sensitive to this signal than others, almost like they dim first. But it's not the systems you need to stay alive. It's not movement, it's not vision, it's not basic function. It's what you might call luxury systems: short-term memory, hormone regulation, reproduction, systems like Kisspeptin. So if the body senses instability, those systems are some of the first to lose clarity. And now the PCOS pattern probably starts to make sense. Ovulation doesn't cleanly fail. It starts, but it doesn't complete. Follicles begin developing, but the signal to finish that isn't strong or consistent enough. And over time, those stalled follicles accumulate. What shows up on ultrasounds as cysts are often just incomplete attempts, cycles that never fully resolved. At the same time, insulin rises, trying to compensate for all this, but insulin doesn't just regulate blood sugar, it also signals the ovaries, and that shifts androgen production. Now ask why. Why would the body increase androgens? Because androgens support muscle, strength, resilience. They shift the body towards survival. In other words, less focus on reproduction and more focused on durability. That's why body composition can change. Muscle can feel easier to maintain. Fat can feel harder to lose. Not broken metabolism, but just different priorities. Even cravings fit into this. If cellular energy is inconsistent, the brain pushes for quick fuel, sugar, carbs, anything fast. And it doesn't feel like a signal. It feels like a lack of control. But again, it's the same system just trying to stabilize itself. When you step back then, all of this lines up. The cycles, the hormones, the metabolism, the cravings, the insulin resistance, not as separate issues, but as one coordinated response to a single signal. PCOS starts to look less like a disorder and more like a state where the body is interpreting its environment as uncertain and adjusting accordingly. So what do you do with that? If the issue is the signal, then the goal isn't to chase symptoms, it's to change what the body is responding to. That's why improving insulin sensitivity helps. It's why stabilizing blood sugar helps. It's why supporting mitochondrial function helps. It's why hydration and mineral balance matter more than people expect. All of those are sending the same message. Energy is stable. You can relax. But there's another layer. Instead of chasing inputs, what if you could reduce the strength of the signal itself? That's where things get more experimental. Compounds like Luteolin become interesting. On the surface, it's just a plant compound, a flavonoid found in foods that's known for anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. But mechanistically, early research suggests that it may interact with the fructose pathway, particularly the enzyme fructokinase, which is the enzyme that triggers that initial drop in cellular energy. The idea is still developing, but it points in a really interesting direction, not just reducing fructose exposure, but potentially reducing how strongly the body reacts to it. And that lines up with something we already see. Luteolin-containing formulations have been shown to improve insulin resistance, liver fat, broader metabolic markers over time, and observationally, many women report shifts in hormonal balance, more regular cycles, more manageable symptoms over time. Now, this isn't just a female signal, because the same pattern shows up in men. When that survival signal is high, men often experience the opposite shift: lower testosterone, lower drive, less focus on reproduction. But the logic is the same, because if conditions are uncertain, reproduction becomes risky. So the system pulls energy away from it. In women, that shows up as disrupted cycles. In men, it often shows up as reduced testosterone and motivation. Different expression, but the same signal. So if you experiment with something like Luteolin, whether through diet or something like Sugar Shield, the question isn't, is this fixing my hormones? It's, is this changing the signal my body is responding to. And the changes to look for are subtle at first. More stable energy, softer cravings, gradual shifts in cycle regularity. Weeks, not days. And this is where the reframe lands. If this model is even partly right, then PCOS isn't your body malfunctioning. It's your body making a decision based on information it's receiving. It's choosing survival. And everything you've been experiencing starts to make sense when you see it that way. So the question isn't just how to fix PCOS. It's much simpler and much more powerful. What signal is your body responding to? And how do you change it?